Time now to check to see what's making headlines in our Across Africa report. Kenyan officials said Monday that they now know the names of all 4 gunmen responsible for the Westgate Mall attack in Nairobi last September. All 4 have been identified as ethnic Somalis, and authorities say none of them have ever been to the U.S. or the UK. Meanwhile, Kenya police say Monday that the fugitive British jihadist known as the White Widow is wanted in connection with 7 murders in Kenya. Authorities said Samantha Luthwaite is also believed to have orchestrated the Nairobi Mall attack that killed at least 67 people. From South Africa comes word that former President Nelson Mandela remains under intense medical care at home, where he's described as relaxed and comfortable. However, the 95-year-old is still unable to speak because of tubes that are keeping his lungs clear of fluid. And finally, a leading conservation group is meeting in Cape Town to discuss whether tough fishing quotas on endangered Atlantic tuna should be maintained. Because of industrial fishing, stocks of bluefin tuna have fallen 85% in the Mediterranean and eastern Atlantic, where they come to spawn. Across Africa continues now with Arise News contributor Frankie Edozien. Hey, Frankie.
Good evening, Debbie.
We got a lot to talk about,
yes.
So let's get started. This first story is about the French hostage that escaped.
Yes, he had actually been held for almost a year. You'll remember almost a year ago, the separatist group Ansaru kidnapped this Frenchman, and he had been an engineer working in Nigeria, but he had been kidnapped for almost a year now, and he had been taken, which was really surprising me, from the remote area where he was to a place called Zaria, which is an ancient historic city, but very much a metropolis. And somehow he got away from his abductors and hailed a motorcycle taxis, which are called okadas in Nigeria, and found his way to a police station. And the Nigerian police turned him over to the French embassy. This morning he was back in France. So really, it's been a spate of bad news for the French, because they've had a lot of people kidnapped lately, and this was good news for them. Just 3 months ago, there had been a plea that he had made a video released on jihadist website saying, please help me. And it seemed really gloomy, but it's a good day.
Yeah, after a year, I'm sure the family was probably waning in their hope and optimism. Any word on how he did it, though, Frankie?
We don't know how he escaped. No one's saying yet. The police are saying that he somehow slipped away, so it leads us to believe that either his captors left him for a moment. But what is really strange is that he was hiding, or he was being kept in plain sight, because that was not a remote area. Zaria is a really big city where he could easily just get off. And he's almost 60 years old, so he's not exactly a spry young man. So this is a major feat. When the President Francois Hollande of France called his wife to say, your husband's coming home, and she said, bravo.
Yeah, absolutely. And he might quibble with you about being a spry young man. He was able to escape his abductor.
He's a young 60.
And you mentioned, of course, there have been a number of kidnapping of the French, and there's another one that you're going to tell us about.
Yes.
And this is about a priest in Cameroon, which is an important location.
Yes, it's French, and he is about 45 years old. His name is George Fenchul. I think I'm not pronouncing that correctly, but he was taken by English-speaking abductors on foot. And now it's come out that they were members of the Boko Haram, which is really important, because the Boko Haram really has been, for the most part, about domestic terrorism. So going into this, it was basically the parish home. They attacked the nuns first, but they decided not to take them. They were asking for euros, all in English. Cameroon is very French-speaking. It's a francophone country, and so it was a bit odd. And then, from what we're told from witnesses who saw them mount this man on a motorbike and take him across the border into Nigeria, once they got into Nigeria, they started to scream for joy. So we really believe this is a situation with Boko Haram. Unfortunately, Boko Haram is really working in that region, and a lot of people have fled to Cameroon trying to avoid the Boko Haram, but now they're getting themselves in there.
And do I remember correctly, frankly, very early this year, there was an entire family that was kidnapped in that same area?
Absolutely. From Cameroon, an entire family was taken. So Boko Haram has been really Not sure if this is conscious, but essentially they are no longer a domestic terror organization because they're going international. And their links with Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb have been cemented because they're working in tandem. Ansarut, which was a splinter group, which is basically about fighting people who are against Muslims in Black Africa, they have been the ones targeting the French. Now it seems Boko Haram is following their lead.
And speaking of these two groups, the U.S. has designated them as terrorist groups. We reported that a day or two ago. What does that mean?
Well, what that means is that if anyone is known to have given them material support, that could be something as simple as housing someone in your property, you could be charged with terrorism charges. There's also, if any of them has any money or if there's any money associated with these groups in U.S. banks or banks that the United States controls, that money would be confiscated, not even frozen. That's the end of that money. And then there's also the visa issues. If they feel like there is somebody who is associated with the Boko Haram or Ansarut who is looking for a visa to the United States, that person will be denied. And if there is someone here who they feel like is connected to them somehow, that person will be deported. This is really important for the global terror because as America goes, so does a lot of the Western world. So it's not just like this is just America's doing, but what the American allies will do. In terms of how they get their money, this will make a little bit of an impact, but not much because they're still looting a lot of banks and they're still holding people for ransom.
Let's move on to another location and topic, and this is Senegal. 5 women were arrested because of their sexual orientation.
Yes, this is really, really tragic because this is very often, we know that there are many, many places around the continent now that have not decriminalize homosexuality. And these 5 women were arrested just at a birthday party, really. And one of those women was a member of the only sort of women's lesbian rights group in Senegal. It's called Women's Smile. So many people feel like this is a way to not just attack the women, but shut down the organization. You know, just remember in June when President Obama went to Senegal, his first stop on his 3-nation African tour, he told President Macky Sall that it's perhaps a good time to think about decriminalizing homosexuality. Macky Sall said, we are a very tolerant nation, but we're not ready to do that. Advocates are saying his words are not matching his deeds because these women, they feel were targeted. And unfortunately, sexual violence against women is rampant in many of these African countries because they believe in something called corrective rape, that if these women are sleeping with men, then they won't be lesbians anymore. So a lot of human rights advocates are saying what Senegal has done is really scaling, it's really taken many steps back in the fight for equality for not just gay men, but women as well on the continent.
I'm sure that there will be an outcry both there locally and internationally as well. Before we run out of time, I want to talk about the very disturbing pictures that popped up. American TV personality, U.S. TV personality, Melissa Botwin, with all of her
she is
trophies, her hunting trophies.
Her hunting trophies. This is a really crazy story that popped up this weekend. She went to South Africa. She killed a lion. She bragged about it on her Facebook page with a picture. This is not the first time she has done something similar. I guess this is the most inhumane because people were really ticked off that she would go to Africa and kill a lion. But she has killed alligators. She has killed turkeys. She has, and basically she is she's a bit of a person who likes to hunt, and she calls herself a huntress. And there are, just before I came in here, I checked in, there are at least 100,000 people who have signed a petition asking her to be banned from South Africa.
Good.
You know, and also she had actually been kicked off a program, I believe it was one of the survivors, because of these kinds of antics. But it seemed as if she does not seem to care.
Yeah, I think I read about those National Geographic program or something like that. Finally, before I let you go, I kind of like this story, and it's sort of the anti-Melissa Botwin.
Yes.
Cheetahs were eating a poor farmer's goats.
Yes.
And man, did they get back at those cheetahs?
They did. You know, this is in rural Kenya near the Somali border, where basically they are goat herders. And 2 cheetahs had been coming in the afternoons and eating these goats and going back. And the herders felt like these cheetahs were targeting them. This was not an accident. So what they do? They waited until the hottest part of the day when it was very hot, and they know the cheetahs don't run so fast. And the cheetahs came to eat the goats, and then they chased them, caught them, but did not kill them. They turned them over to the Kenyan Wildlife Service.
And that's the part I love the most. I love the most. Cheetahs are the fastest land mammal, but they can only run that far for a few seconds.
They
and
can't
then they run
outthink
themselves.
human beings.
Well, I don't know. They're pretty crafty, but they can't run that fast for that far. So, very smart farmer. Score one for the goat farmer.
So, one for the goat farmer. Melissa Bachman has taken us a step back in terms of conserving animals, but these rural Kenyans have shown us that, you don't have to kill animals that bother you. You don't have to kill animals for any reason, really.
Just run them down till they can't run anymore. All right, Frankie, thank you so much.
Thank you, Debbie.
See you next week.
Okay.
And you're watching Arise America.